Welcome to C's Backstage, your all-access pass to everything you need to know to design, produce, and inspire your next event. I'm your host, Troy Peters, C's Productions' very own Chief Experience Officer, here to guide you through the world of live event production. Remember to subscribe to the podcast at cspro.com/backstage or wherever you get your favorite podcasts so you too can stay in the know and get backstage. On today's podcast, we're joined by Ben Lockwood, Director of Client Relations at Warp Speed Technologies, as well as our very own Zach Grant, President and CEO of C's Productions. Today, we're asking a question. Who are all these people and what the hell do they do?
Yeah, so have you, well, I guess on the client side, have you ever got a bid and it had like 27 people on the bid, bunch of different titles, and you're all, who the fuck are all these people?
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Like, I've even had that at times, and I work in the industry.
Yep.
Because sometimes the meaning of this position for this company isn't the same as it is for this one. So we want to help put some clarity to what all these people are doing, whether or not they... Well, then on your side, when you get these bids, you know, hey, I need this person, I don't need this person, whatever, right? So that's the goal of today.
Yeah, I mean, it's everything from the bottom or the sort of coming into the building, from truck loaders and unloaders to your stage hands to your lead positions, all the way up to producers and executive producers and directors and stage managers. So we're going to kind of go through the whole gambit. So when you look at your bill, you'll have hopefully an understanding, and you'll also know who to go to when you've got a challenge, when something's happening, whether it's a video not playing versus you can't get somebody on stage, right? Like managing all these assets. Yep. So a lot of times we'll be at a venue, that's maybe we've got to use truck loaders or unloaders. What do they do?
Yeah, well, that's probably the easiest one. They load trucks.
They load trucks and they unload trucks.
Yeah. Hold on, let me write this down.
Can they do anything else? Can they go and then start helping to set up?
No.
So if you see truck loader or truck unloader on your bill,
that's all
their job is to unload the truck, which, to be honest, you get a show, which, I mean, some shows we do of dozens of semis going to them. It just needs a team that is just charged with unloading and getting that gear off the truck in the right way and pushed into the room, so then the team that is there to facilitate your event can start building it out.
Yep. Now, typically, I think you find that in union venues.
More union venues,
often,
larger venues for sure. Yep.
And there is some math to how many loaders you need. If you got more trucks, obviously you need more loaders. Those guys are typically on a 5-hour mini, even if they're just dumping a truck for 30 minutes.
Yep.
So just be aware.
Yeah. So from there, they take the gear, they hand that gear off to the next team, your stage hands and your sort of second level, sort of A2, V2, ME, master electrician, that then starts to bring that into the room, and you start working with your leads. So a typical show will have let's say we've got everything, video, audio, lighting. What's your V1 do? What's their role?
Well, I think there's a lot of different types of V1s, actually.
Yeah, see?
So I don't know if we're going to start opening that can of worms already. But
let's open it.
Okay, we can open it.
This coffee is delicious.
So V1s, I've got, it depends on what they're doing, right? So you could have a V1 who's more of like a basic V1 running, a typical switcher. It's 2 screens, whatever. You could have a V1 that's running your E2 or Spider. For those of you that know what that means, you could have a V1 that's running a media server if there's all kinds of content. So it just... The way that we put labor on the quote is more specific to what they're doing to help identify specifically what their purpose is.
So I might not say V1, but the V1 position is a Spider operator, and that's what they're doing.
On our quotes, it'll usually say V1 Spider.
Okay, there you go. How are you guys seeing that? Are you seeing similar, like if you've got to have like somebody's running playback, somebody's running switching cameras, or?
But not as much.
No,
it's for our setups, like if we're doing the full AV set, like we'll have an A1 and then maybe a V1 if needed, but it's usually, pretty basic where it's just, we'll put a technician in there.
Right.
And they'll handle everything.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I feel like we started to get more specific with it because of streaming. Because when I was just putting A1 on a quote, that wasn't telling the client nor the guy coming in doing the job, hey, you're going to be mixing monitors front of house, you're doing the broadcast, or whatever, right? Or maybe they're just there for RF. I don't know, right? So we started to put make those positions more granular. So it made sense to not just us, but the clients.
I think it also helps for the technician too. So if you've been hired as a V1 spider up, you know you're operating a spider as opposed to a V1 switch.
Absolutely.
And then you know you're running some sort of switching console where you're switching between cameras.
That, and I've hired A1s in the past that are like really, really good monitor engineers or really good front of house guys, and maybe they're not as good at the other position, or they didn't want to do that other position, and you try and switch them, and now they don't want to do it. So it's better for sure on both sides if you can clarify that up front, I think.
Yep. So when it gets into that sort of leadership role of, the big one that we always hear and we don't quite understand even in our own world is the TD versus stage manager versus producer. And from what I understand, that those terms are even used differently throughout the country. If you're in the Northeast, a TD might be your show caller, or vice versa. If you're here in Southern California, where the director term comes from Hollywood, and that would be the person directing the stage. But everywhere else in the country, that'd probably be the stage manager who's directing what's happening, or the show caller who's directing what's happening. So what the F?
Yeah, like you say the three positions, and I have in my head what I think of them as.
What do you
think?
Right.
So what do you think?
Like I would have a technical director be the one who's calling the show, like all right, camera 1, camera 2, switch to this, mic, turn up this, whatever. Stage manager handling the talent, back to getting them up and off the stage, and whatever that third position was, they have their role.
Yeah, totally. And that's true. I used to subscribe to the TD, the technical director, because I come from television, motion picture production. That would be the person directing the cameras. They'd be directing the onstage elements and calling the show. But yet now that I've been in the business for a while, I've found that it's better I often use the TD as the person that understands the technical needs of a room. So from the rigging to signal flow and the basic sort of operations of what you're trying to install in a space, whatever that venue space is, indoor or outdoor, they're really the technical, like knowing what's going on. Whereas a project manager might work in hand with that person, or sometimes they could be the same person. Project manager is kind of like looking at like schedules and overall timelines and timesheets for crew coming in and out and managing the client. And the TD is going to be way more focused on, does this actually fit in the space, or how are the rigging points weighted and that sort of thing.
I have kind of the same thought. So we will call out specifically show caller or show director for the person calling the show. The TD is, like you said, generally focused on the tech and GS and making that go right. And then production manager or project manager also used interchangeably. And that's another confusing thing, is sometimes you've got project production, or I don't know, different whatever. So
let's go. So what about producer? When do you put a producer on a show? So if we've got a show that, we're coming into the Marriott Hotel here in town, and it's 2 screens, it's got a stage, it's 3-4 speakers on stage. Not really a lot going on. They're just making some announcements. There's some education. Do you put a producer on that show, or is that typically a producer? So in my mind, a producer is somebody who helps pull the idea from the client and helps to like sculpt the event.
Exactly what I think of.
Yeah.
Okay, we agree on one.
It's sort of the way for the client to have a voice in that room when they don't know what they don't know the technical side. But it's somebody who can convey their idea in a way that makes sense to.
Yeah, they bring the whole thing together generally.
Yeah.
Agree.
So they're really kind of an extension of the client's team. They're really kind of like, okay, tell us what's the message we're trying to accomplish by putting everybody in a room together, and the producer will help you craft the best way to deliver that message. Yeah.
Now I'll say this, because you're talking for a small show. As shows, depending on size, the smaller shows, I feel like the roles are a little bit more loose, right? But as the shows get bigger, the roles get more narrowly defined. So on a small show, we probably are not bringing in the producer. We're probably being hired by the producer or someone on their side. But on a big show, we may be putting a producer into the process because there's so many things going on,
Yep. That's more of a full service approach.
Yeah.
Right. We'll help you deliver. It's more of an agency approach, I guess. Kind of thing.
Where do you think people get hung up? Like, what would be most helpful for people to know here? Other than there's a lot of positions, they all do different things.
I think really it all comes down to wanting to deliver an event, right? An experience where you don't want any clunkiness to it. So when you've got those bigger shows, like we're talking about, where there's more elements involved, you need to add more people, right? So we always talk about, we had a podcast recently on risk mitigation and how do we prevent any mistakes from happening. Well, if you've got somebody that's charged with playing videos and doing PowerPoint, which on a smaller show always are combined, right? Playback and graphics are the same position. But if you need to be perfectly orchestrated where this video plays and then we need to pull up that slide, or maybe there's an awardee and we can't accidentally advance because it shows the winner next.
Right.
You need to have those people focused on that. Or even one thing that gets overlooked a lot is a record op. I think you can probably speak a little bit about this, about having somebody that is just dedicated to watch and make sure the records are done properly.
Yeah.
And a lot of time people are like, well, don't they just push record and walk away?
That's one of the ones that gets overlooked a lot.
Yeah. And you need to have that.
I was going to say a similar thing where I think, because I used to, when I was on the client side, look at the bill that way and be like, why do you need all of these people? Can't this person who's sitting next to that machine also press play? But I think it's eliminating the single points of failure in something and having a little bit of redundancy, but more just, allowing that person to focus on what they need to do.
Yeah.
And even with recording, people get up close to the mic or back up from the mic, or they're, like volume needs to be adjusted. And there are all sorts of little things if you want a good product in the end or a good, live show to happen, then.
Because these are all still people doing things. So if you put too much on one person, they might struggle to do too many things, right? So
for sure, yeah.
And then when things like the ghost in the machine or whatever technical thing, if a laptop fails, you want that person that's dedicated into that graphics position to be fixing it and not having to try and queue up the next video or something that's playing. Yeah. You want people that if a microphone fails, the A2 audio engineer is going to be fixing that, not the A1 who's got to leave the console and get to the backstage area and fix it. You need to have some of those positions just to make sure you have a safe event.
Yeah. So I've got one thought too, just completely changing gears here, but when I'm building proposals, I've noticed that over the last couple of years, I always look at like the gear to labor ratio, roughly, and I've noticed, in prior years, like in the before times,
the before times,
labor would probably account for about 30 to 40% of the bill, depending. And now it's more like 50, 60%.
Yep.
So if you're on the client side and you're getting a bill that is way below that 50, 60%, your labor is probably not enough, I would say. And if it's far exceeding that, there might be a reason for that. Like I did just do a quote where it was more because we're going through a union venue and we have to follow these rules, and it's accounting for like 65, 70% of the bill. But anyway, if it doesn't fit in that like 50-ish percent, give or take like 5, maybe 10% at most, like maybe there's something off, And that's something I always look for.
I think the other side of that is that, things like equipment get cheaper, right? When LED walls came out, super expensive, but now there's so many manufacturers. It's been around for 10 years. The price point has come down on the equipment, but experienced technicians will always demand more and more, and that will always go up. So I think we're just naturally seeing a shift where the equipment's been around now for a while, so it's a little bit cheaper, but everybody's costs of labor is going higher because people are getting more specialized. Yeah. And not to mention just the job market alone.
Exactly. Right. Specialized guys, always more expensive. When there's less of somebody, more expensive. And, we lost, 30% of people in the workforce over the last couple of years. Exactly. So obviously that's going to have an impact.
Just AV in general, you run into the adage of good, fast, and cheap. Pick two, right? Yeah. Yep.
On the client side or on the production side, what do you look for in the guys on your crew that you want to have back? Like, it's not necessarily that they push the buttons the right way, right? What are those intangibles that maybe the guys don't think about that would want you to go, hey, I really want, Joe back on the show. He did X, Y, and Z.
I think anyone who takes something off my plate, when I was doing that, and I was like, oh, well, Don's here, so I know this room is taken care of. Like, I don't need to come and check on it all the time, make sure things are happening. Like, he knows how to run a crew and will make things happen and will let me know if something's wrong.
Yeah.
And that's what I look for now when I have clients who are looking for an AV company to partner with. I mean, if if it's something that we're not going to do, I'll be like, you know what? I know Mike is going to take care of you guys. Personalities would match, and he does a really good job.
Personalities are a huge thing, aren't they? Yeah.
For me, attitude.
Yep.
I want a guy that's solutions oriented, trying to fix problems, not just pointing them out and saying, "Hey, there's this thing."
Yes.
That's a good point. So, when it gets down to like those engineers that are in the room, and say you've got a playback or a spider engineer who's really they're so focused on that job. They're so good at that 8 or 9 out of 10 of those guys I would never introduce to a client, because they're so immersed in this, what I call like they're in the matrix, right? But those guys will fix anything. Something starts going south, they know how to like get in there, rewire something, make it happen, boot something, reinstall something and make it happen. But you've got the TDs and the producers and the project managers that need to be more client focused, can kind of bridge the gap, right? And those are few and far between. Finding somebody that can understand the technology but still have a normal conversation, for lack of a better word.
No, sometimes it is like it's a right brain, left brain, or something like that, where it's like a technology on this side and hygiene's on this side.
Right.
And one is really winning out.
Totally.
Hygiene.
You don't want, and you don't want the other side where it's somebody who's so talks the talk, but doesn't really focus on the job.
Yeah, no, give me the guy who's bald and has a ponytail.
Yeah. Bald and a ponytail.
What about the guy who's good, but he goes, "Oh, that's not my job." How do we feel about that guy?
Yeah, I want him to know whose job it is and find that person,
Right.
If he can't do it. I don't like, in any job that I've had, I've never liked that person.
Yeah.
Right.
There's no I in team, right? It's part of that, but there is in video and audio.
Yeah. There's a me if you jumble it up.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like if you're on the team, like you're on the team, right?
Yeah.
Whether
Everybody's here to get
you
the
see
job
something
done.
failing in your department or someone else's department,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you should
Jump
just be
in.
like, okay, got it.
Yeah.
And then go find, in the background, figure out whose job it is.
If you don't know, then just be a good human being and say, you know what? That's a great question. Let me figure out who can do that for you.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you can't do it, fine.
Yeah.
But
I'm looking for those team players, the guys that'll go above and beyond, okay, I hired you to be the A1 for this show, but client asked something that, it's a little out of your wheelhouse, but you jumped in, you did it, like that little X factor. That's what I want out of my guys.
And I
those
love
are the guys that I hire over and over and over again.
And I love when they get me thinking outside the box, right? You get an A1 who came in to do a show for me a few months ago, and they had sourced some sort of AI VOG that was absolutely amazing. And they could just, like, it could be a woman with an Australian accent by just a couple of keystrokes. And the quality of that voiceover was absolutely perfect. But I was like, thank you. You've just elevated our game here. I thought I had to come in and we had to find somebody to pre-record all these VOs. And he just like, no, just type in what you want to say. And it was stellar. I was like, this is outstanding. So, yeah, brought something to the table.
What's the takeaway? I think the budget ratio is a good thing to keep in mind just as a general guide for whether your show is under or overstaffed. And if you don't know, ask, I guess, right? Because we can get really into the weeds here. I've got like 10 camera positions, and we probably don't want to go through all the camera positions, but there's a lot. Bigger shows have got more specialized, right? The scope narrows. Smaller shows, wider scope. Don't overwhelm your people with too many jobs.
But it's the same thing, like a camera operator that does a long lens camera versus a camera operator who's just, kind of pointing and shooting versus a camera operator who's got to do a handheld camera versus a camera operator who's got it on a crane versus a camera operator who's got RoboCams.
Yep, exactly.
Those are all different specialties. They're all just camera operators.
Yeah.
But,
yes. And you can have someone who's like, oh, no, my niece is a photographer. She'll do it. But it's it's really, I mean, I have a degree in French, right? And I'll have them like, oh, yeah, my daughter speaks French because she's in high school.
Sure.
And like, well, not quite. Like there's a being specialized in certain areas where you just, like you're not going to have that. Otherwise,
I think the takeaway is, really have an honest conversation with your AV provider or whoever your company is that's put this list of what they're doing and ask what each position's in charge of. And to be honest, you should probably communicate that with the team that's going to be there too. You want everybody to know what their role is and why they're justified. So
yeah, if the company providing the quote can't provide a valid reason of why that person's there, then maybe they don't need to belong there. At the same time, if they are quoting them and you trust them, trust that they're putting the people on there that they need and that they'll know where they can or cannot pull back to the point where it's going to affect what you're trying to do on your show, right? There's, for instance, back to cameras for a second, like some shows, maybe you need the camera shader because we're doing a broadcast and, it looks different in different places and we've got 4 cameras and these guys are going to be doing too much. A lot of times the V1 will switch cams if we only have a couple, right? Yep. But like, I don't know, just trust. I think it comes down to trust.
The communication, right?
Trust and
have that communication. So producer, assistant producer, technical director, production manager, they're all roles that are kind of overseeing.
Yeah, I think,
and those are the roles that are kind of sometimes a little bit more nebulous in sort of what they do, but really kind of having that conversation again and really understanding what your producer's in charge of all the content, or your show caller's calling from the front of house position, but your project manager is kind of everywhere and available to you to oversee everything. And
yeah, I think that with the event management, the show management, these positions, the important thing is like someone's got to do it, no matter what event it is. Sometimes the client's going to do it on maybe a smaller one. Maybe you're going to do it on a bigger one. But like all of those jobs need to be accounted for by somebody, right? Mm-hmm. If you've got cues, someone's got to call those cues. If you've got talent, someone's got to move the talent on and off stage and all those things. So just talking it through, making sure that, all of those parts are hit, whether it's client providing these or we're doing that, if we're working with the client that's a producer, I mean.
Yeah. And those are all the soft values. Like the hard values are the people that are actually pushing the buttons, but those soft values, those people that you can go and talk to in the room, like, hey, our CEO is late this morning. Those are the people that are going to fix that, right? They're not the video engineer is not going to be like, so our CEO is late. That doesn't affect me. But if you've got a true producer or show caller in there, they'll know like, okay, well, let's put up some slides. Let's play the video a little bit early. Let's do some trivia in the room, or let's have an MC take the stage, right? Like
they're kind of like the glue that's going to hold it all together.
Yeah. And they're really on those level events, you really want that. You want that person that's there ready to make that decision, ready to make sure the experience level for your audience stays where it needs to be.
Yeah. You're making me think of going off the producer thing, but an awards show that I did for years, and we had just someone from the association handling the talent backstage and getting them up and off. And then about year 3, added a stage manager to the show, and it was just a night and day. You'd think anybody could do that.
Yeah.
Like, okay, your turn to speak, get up there. But just the skill set that she had and just the years of experience, it made the show that much different, and everything was on time, and it was like, okay, you're doing this every year.
Yep.
Coming back, like it is worth the cost. Because you've made the show better.
This is what we've talked about many times, is having the right people on the show makes all of the difference, right? 2 people can build the same position even for the same rate, but maybe Peter's better than Paul and you want Peter. So
Yeah. And the nice thing too is if you're working with that same group over and over, they're going to start to know your flow. They're going to know your attendees. They're going to know when those challenges come up. We had, speaking about the CEO, I was doing a credit union association for many years in Las Vegas, and the CEO was late every morning for the kickoff for the first opening keynote. We're talking 15 minutes late. Show should have started at 9 a.m. He's not down in the ballroom yet. And we knew that by year 2 or 3. And we said, all right, well, we're going to start the show differently. We're going to play a video. We're going to have some trivia slides so the crowd's still engaged when that CEO doesn't show up in time. Mm-hmm. Sure enough, year 3, he didn't show up again. We had something to do. Instead of, please stand by while we wait for the program to start. Talk amongst yourselves. Right?
Jeff's going to get up and tell the 3 jokes he knows.
Exactly. 3 specifically.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I think this was good. I'm a little more confused than I was coming into this, but it really is. You've got these simple titles don't give you enough, I think, is the takeaway. have a title and have an understanding of what that role is, what their job, even if it's just a couple of words, that the producer is in charge with helping us craft the vision. The showman or the stage manager is directing the stage and the show and all the assets. Your V1 spider is running a spider. Your V1 camera is running camera switch. So just having a little bit more understanding there. And well, thanks again. This has been C's Backstage, your all access pass to everything you need to know to design, produce, and inspire your next event. Remember to subscribe to the podcast at cspro.com/backstage or wherever you get your favorite podcasts so you too can be in the know. Thanks, everybody.